The showdown between two powers had reached its peak in Burkina Faso's capital. Klaus Weber, CEO of German defense giant Rheinmetall, had come face-to-face with Traoré to play his final card. While billion-dollar arms sales agreements lay on the table, there was a truth Weber didn't know. Traoré had learned about his company's secret operations in Mali, and now it was time to show the courage to stand against a $100 million bribe. Klaus Weber, 62 years old, was the third-generation CEO of Rheinmetall AG. He had been at the helm of one of Germany's largest defense companies for 15 years. With his carefully groomed gray hair, expensive Swiss watch, and perfect German discipline, he represented a typical European industrialist. Ibrahim Traoré, sitting across from him, with his military uniform and red beret, came from a completely different world. "Herr President," said Weber in his perfect English, "this agreement is of strategic importance for both your country and my company. A $2.5 billion defense package will make Burkina Faso the country with the strongest army in the region." Traoré said nothing. He just listened to Weber. This silence was beginning to make the experienced German CEO uncomfortable. "Of course," Weber continued, "an agreement of this magnitude requires some additional arrangements. Transfer of German technology, personnel training, logistics support, and naturally appropriate incentives for decision-makers." "Incentives?" Traoré asked for the first time, his voice low but clear. Weber smiled. "Certainly. There are standard procedures in this sector. We apply them in all major agreements in France, England, even America. The same approach everywhere." "What about Mali?" Traoré asked suddenly. Weber's smile froze. "Mali? Yes. We work with Mali too." "What kind of work?" Traoré's eyes were fixed on Weber. "Standard defense cooperations, training programs." Weber began to stammer. Traoré slowly stood up and went to the window. "I had a very interesting phone conversation last night, Herr Weber." "Guess with whom?" Weber's heart began to race. "I don't know." "With Mali's former defense minister, Colonel Moussa Traoré." Traoré turned and looked at Weber. "Does this name sound familiar to you?" Now Weber's face had turned pale. He's not a reliable man. He was removed from office for political reasons." "Really?" Traoré returned to his desk and took out a confidential file from the drawer. "Then are these documents wrong?" Weber's breath caught. "What documents?" But Traoré didn't open the file yet. Instead, he continued to pressure Weber. "First, tell me about your operations in Mali, especially about your training programs in the 2021-2022 period. We only provided legitimate military training there," Weber stammered. "Legitimate?" Traoré gently shook the file in his hand. "Then why do these photographs tell a different story?" Weber was now completely panicked. "What photographs? What do you have?" "Patience, Herr Weber. Everything has its time." Traoré placed the file on the table but didn't open it. "Now tell me your proposal again. This time I'll listen much more carefully." Weber was drenched in sweat. How much did the man across from him know about him? And what was really in that file? "Herr President," said Weber, trying to control his voice, "maybe there's a misunderstanding. If you have concerns about our activities in Mali..." "Concern?" Traoré looked at him with a cold smile. "These are things we cannot explain with the word concern, Herr Weber. Let me ask you a question. What happened in Mali's Gao region in 2022? Weber's hands began to tremble. Some security issues occurred." "Security issues?" Traoré slowly began to open the file. "The security issues that caused the deaths of 300 civilians? That wasn't our responsibility, wasn't it?" Traoré pulled out the first document from the file but didn't show it to Weber. He just looked at it himself and shook his head. "These documents say differently." Weber had now completely lost his control. "Please, I need to see these documents. What is being claimed about me?" "Don't rush," said Traoré. "Let's listen to the complete story first. What happened after 2022? What did the Mali government want from you? Legal processes were followed. $800 million, said Traore. The Mali government wanted $800 million for the damages caused by your training program, is that correct? Weber couldn't say anything anymore, he just stared at the file in Traore's hand. But what's really interesting, Traore continued, is how this compensation was resolved. Let me mention some familiar names. Mali's former Chief of General Staff General Ibrahim Keita, former Interior Minister Amadou Sanogo. With each name, Weber's face grew paler. Both are now living in Germany. Keita's villa in Munich is very beautiful. Sanogo's businesses in Berlin are also quite profitable. What are you trying to imply? Asked Weber, his voice now like a whisper. I'm not implying. I'm saying it clearly. Traore finally took out the first photograph from the file and placed it on the table. Here's the proof. The photograph showed Weber dining with Mali's former officials at a restaurant in Berlin. Open briefcases and stacks of cash were visible on the table. As Weber looked at the photograph, his world collapsed. Where did this come from? What's important is not where it came from, said Traore. What's important is that this is just the beginning. He pulled out other documents from the file. Bank transfers, audio recordings, email correspondence, a complete archive. Weber was now pleading desperately. Please, these documents must never be revealed. I'll give you whatever you want. Really? Traore stood up. What can you give? Weber opened his briefcase with trembling hands and took out a checkbook. $50 million, immediately, no questions. Asked, 50 million? Traore smiled. Continue. 75 million, this is my final offer. Not enough. Weber looked around desperately, then took out his phone. $100 million, it will be transferred to your account within half an hour. A deep silence fell over the room. Weber waited, holding his breath. $100 million was equivalent to the annual budget of most countries. Traore looked at Weber for a long time, then slowly returned to his desk. He took out a small bottle from the drawer and placed it in front of Weber. What is this? Asked Weber, puzzled. Soil, said Traore simply. From a cemetery in Mali's Gao region. From the cemetery where 300 civilians who died because of your training program are buried. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees suddenly. Herr Weber, Traore continued, his voice now like steel. I didn't come here to negotiate. I came to inform you. All of Rheinmetall AG's activities in Burkina Faso are banned. Remove all your personnel within 48 hours. Weber's face contorted with anger and disbelief. You can't do this. We have contracts. We have agreements with the German government. Traore slowly stood up. And I have the support of the Burkinabe people. Let's see which proves stronger. Weber's face reddened. You're making a big mistake. Your small country cannot stand against Germany. Economic sanctions, diplomatic pressure, you'll lose everything. Maybe, said Traore calmly, but at least we'll lose with our honor. As Traore turned to leave the room, Weber shouted after him, If you reveal these documents, not only I but also your friends in Mali will be harmed. Traore stopped at the door and turned around. My friends in Mali? Let me tell you a secret. Herr Weber, the reason I spoke with Colonel Moussa Traore was that he also wanted to obtain these documents. The Mali government is planning to file an international lawsuit against Rheinmetall. The last glimmer of hope on Weber's face also died. 24 hours later, Klaus Weber was at an emergency board meeting at Rheinmetall AG headquarters in Düsseldorf. He had the documents and photographs he brought from Burkina Faso in his hands. How bad is the situation? Asked board chairman Dieter Hoffmann. Catastrophic, said Weber. If these documents leak to the public, we'll experience the biggest scandal in company history. How secret can the Mali operations remain? They can't remain secret anymore. Traore has everything. And the Mali government is also taking action. Hoffmann slammed the table. How did this happen? Where are our security protocols? I don't know, but it's too late now. Traore might reveal these documents tomorrow. At that moment, the meeting room door opened and the company's legal counsel, Dr. Ingrid Schaefer, rushed in. Herr Hoffmann, emergency. The federal prosecutor's office just called. The Burkina Faso government has filed an official complaint about our company. International bribery and human rights violations. Hoffmann's face turned pale. What does this mean? It means Traore isn't limiting himself to the media, said Dr. Schaefer. He's also complained to the European Union, together with the Mali government. Weber had collapsed now. Everything is over. Not yet, said Hoffmann. We're starting an emergency PR campaign. We'll attribute the Mali incidents to unavoidable risks in conflict zones. But it was too late. That night, at exactly 8 p.m. Burkina Faso time, Ibrahim Traore made a special statement to the international press. Today, he began, we protected our country from a great danger. German defense giant Rheinmetall AG wanted to turn our country into an arms market. Then he showed the photographs taken with Weber, documents of civilian deaths in Mali and bribery records one by one. These documents, said Traore, are clear evidence of how Rheinmetall operates in Africa. First, they create conflict. Then, they bribe officials to escape responsibility. At the end of his speech, he added, Africa is now closing its doors to such companies. Our country's security is not more valuable than our people's lives. A week later, the Bundestag Defense Committee in Berlin launched an investigation into Rheinmetall. Klaus Weber was forced to testify before the German parliament. Herr Weber, said committee chairman Dr. Marie Zimmermann, is it true that you ignored civilian casualties during your operations in Mali? Weber gave a cautious answer following his lawyer's advice. We only provided official military training. We are not responsible for civilian casualties. So is it true that you bribed Mali officials? This is a completely false allegation. Then, how will you explain these photographs? Dr. Zimmermann showed the photographs of Weber with Mali officials. Weber tried to look surprised. This is just a business dinner. Are the piles of money on the table also part of the business? Dinner? The hall laughed. Weber was completely cornered. 6 months later, Rheinmetall AG's African operations were severely restricted. The company suffered serious financial losses due to heavy penalties from the EU and various countries. Klaus Weber was forced to resign. In Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore announced a new defense strategy, the Defense Independence Burkina Faso project. By establishing a domestic defense industry, they would free the country from foreign weapons dependency. The project was being implemented with technology companies from Israel and South Korea. This time, the conditions were different. Technology transfer, local production, transparency. Real security is not achieved just by buying weapons, said Traore at the project's opening ceremony. Real security comes from being able to produce your own weapons. At the ceremony, Mali's new defense minister, Colonel Moussa Traore, was also present. After that phone conversation, Ibrahim Traore had supported him in cleaning up corruption in his country. President Traore, said Colonel Moussa, your courage inspires the entire Sahel region. None of us are alone anymore. Indeed, it was so. Traore's exposure of the Rheinmetall scandal had caused other African countries to take action against similar companies. Chad, Niger, Senegal, all were making new regulations, demanding stricter ethical standards from foreign defense companies. A year later, after Klaus Weber retired, he strangely began volunteering for peace projects in Africa. At his home in Germany, he decided to write a letter to Burkina Faso. Dear President Traore, I know this letter I'm writing to you will seem strange. You ended my career, but now I understand that this was right. For years, I saw Africa only as a market. I never thought about its people, their needs, their pain. Only profit margins mattered. I never remembered the 300 civilians who died in Mali. Now I think about them every night. What you did wasn't just punishing me, it was questioning an entire system, and I'm grateful to you for that. Klaus Weber. After reading the letter, Traore wrote a brief reply. Herr Weber, thank you for your letter. The past cannot be changed, but the future can be changed. If you are truly repentant, you can support peace. Projects in Africa. Everyone deserves the right to start over. Ibrahim Traore. 2 years later, Klaus Weber was working as a volunteer at a peace center in Mali. He was providing education to children who were victims of conflict and supporting families. One day, an elderly woman approached him at the center where he worked. "You," said the woman, "aren't you the man from that German company?" "My son died in that conflict." Weber bowed his head. "Yes, I bear responsibility." The woman looked at him for a while, then put her hand on his shoulder. "Now you're helping our children. This is good." At that moment, Weber understood what real forgiveness meant. Today, Burkina Faso has Africa's fastest-growing domestic defense industry. Traore'S Defense Independence Project is being modeled by 15 African countries. The Rheinmetall scandal didn't just cause one company's decline, it made foreign defense companies throughout Africa behave more ethically. And it all began with Ibrahim Traore having the courage to reject a $100 million bribe that day. Sometimes the greatest victory is rejecting money. But rejecting that money requires great character. Traore had shown that character, and he had protected not just his country, but the honor of an entire continent.